So one of the questions that often comes up when we talk about organizations that lead together that don't have managers in the traditional sense, they say like, great, what happens when there's somebody that's causing a problem? What happens when there'd be somebody that I might want to fire, or the organization needs to let go of? And so, Brent, I'm curious what you've seen out there as the most common paths, both in traditional organizations, and if any of those patterns repeat in self-organizing organizations that are leading together.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I'll start by talking about the unhealthy paths that I think most of us have probably seen in one form or another. One is the fast exit. Somebody hasn't done something that or somebody has done something that I'm not happy about, and so let's just move them out of the organization by 5 o'clock today. And it's fast, it's harsh. It really is unkind to the individual and often unhealthy to the organization. The second is slow, which is there's a problem, we ignore it, and until it becomes the the pebble in the shoe that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually it almost flops back then to the move fast approach. And then the third is this person needs to be fixed, and so we're going to fix them. And that really isn't the role of us with our colleagues. Nobody needs to be fixed. Our belief is everybody is whole. There may be some opportunities for learning and growth that we can help introduce individuals to, but nobody needs fixed. And so I would say all three of those we've all experienced them, and there is it's easy for those things to creep into lead together organizations as well, because it's very hard, I think, for individuals to figure out, well, what else is possible? And I think, Susan, maybe you're going to talk about some of those things that you've seen. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think that it's also quite geographically and culturally dependent, this particular challenge. In some countries, it's quite easy and straightforward. Pretty much for any reason, you can hand somebody a letter and kind of march them on the day that it happens. In New Zealand, for example, it's really difficult, and there is a whole process that can take many months to exit a colleague. And I've seen on way too many occasions, organizations actually, rather than dealing with that process, going through the act of doing a restructure, so that they can say that they're restructuring, disestablishing roles, so that they can get rid of those 3 or 4 pebbles in the shoe that have been irritating for the last 3 years. And so in any country, but I'm just thinking of it from my particular direct experience. The principle of actually being clear, the principle of actually doing regular conversations as teams around your roles, talking about the expectations, talking about how we are meeting our accountabilities. And even in countries like New Zealand, trying to maybe even write into the employment contract that we are doing things in a slightly different way here. That means that we have an agreement around how we collectively manage this difficulty, because it's not easy, right? Exiting colleagues is never easy. So the key principles and practices: talk about it, be transparent, close your feedback loops quickly, and have a culture that actually allows this process to be possible.
So if we do all that and it actually shows up in practice, Brent, I'm curious from your experience, how does it work, both the bright spots on when things go well and and the challenging bits when they don't.
Mm-hmm. I'll maybe share an example from a few different organizations that I'm familiar with and the process that they use. Different organizations call this process by different things, but different names. But in the one organization I'm thinking about, it's called a future relationship advice process. So when the time comes that it feels like we need, the status quo is not working, then a colleague, depends on the organization and how they structure this, but a colleague will sit down with the individual and say, hey, you know what, things I don't think are working, and we need to come up with a new path forward. So we've got some options. And so one option is we have a package, and if you'd like to take this package, it's here, it's available, it will continue to be available to you. And the other option is that you can go through a role advice process where you go seek advice from a number of people in the organization and work toward coming up with a path forward that is that we can get buy-in from the team and your colleagues around. And this is all done with the support of coaches. It's done in a very helpful environment. It's facilitated so that individuals that go through this, and I've personally helped some individuals go through this. It's not the easiest process, but when you get to the end, the learning and the growth for the individuals is fabulous. Some people end up leaving the organization, and they leave with more information that will help them in their future career. And others stay in the organization. They reshape their roles. They onboard feedback that maybe they just weren't able to onboard or wasn't delivered in a way that they could hear before. So that balance of offering a clear, fair package, because some people might say, you know what, maybe I should just leave. And there's an opportunity for them to do that, but there's also an opportunity and a path for them to potentially stay. And when done well, that is a very healthy opportunity for growth, learning, and the betterment of everybody that's involved.
And I think it's important to notice that colleagues, we don't just exit colleagues because there's somehow an ill fit, right? Sometimes and often, like, colleagues leave because it's the right thing for them. And I think that it's equally important to think about how we can celebrate that and somehow retain and integrate their learning into the story and the we'd say in New Zealand, the whakapapa, the genealogy of the organization. And how do we make that a joyful experience when that's the case?
That's amazing, right? Because there's so much good that's often there. And sometimes there's really challenging situations where it's hard to find the good in the immediate, and like bigger actions need to take place, right? Many organizations, like in 2020 and the COVID crisis, were facing really challenging financial times. The only way the organization seemed to be able to stay afloat would be doing large scale layoffs. How do organizations that are leading together handle that, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, the what we keep on hammering away on is like transparency and trust. So, bring the challenge to the team, right? Bring the reality of the situation to the team. So many times, I've heard in companies that I worked with saying, "Gosh, if they would have actually just told us what was going on beforehand, like I've been wanting to leave for a while. And if this invitation was there and I wasn't, if I didn't have to feel guilty about leaving, then I would have done that." Or even like really creative solutions, like, okay, for this particular role, let's job share it. I've been keen to take a little bit of time off to do a bit of study, or there's so many solutions that are nascent within the people of the organization. If leaders can just trust the collective intelligence of the group and trust that they can handle it, this goes to the parent-child dynamic as well, right? So there's so many elements at play here when we're talking about challenging and critical, especially financial decisions for organizations. Another story of this that I really love is an organization in Colorado some years ago where the CEO was trying to build something special, something that was a lead together organization that had a particular purpose and value alignment. And he found that wasn't ever, he came to the conclusion or the recognition that was never going to be manifest in the company as it was. So he made the decision to close the company. And he shared that, but he didn't close the company until everybody in the organization had found another job. So that's another equally interesting way of when we can acknowledge what we need as leaders, and we can trust the whole of our organization to be able to come up with creative solutions or share in the challenge, beautiful things can manifest.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of like an intentional uncoupling of an organization and breaking apart the parts. And that is just wild, but crazy what we can do with a little bit of intention. Thank you.